What's going on, guys? It's Rich here from the Millibit, and today you're going to learn how to take your website, no matter how simple it is, and put it on the cloud using Heroku. So if you haven't already created a Flask app website, then go back to the previous video about how to make a Flask app using Python. It's basically a really cool way to create a simple website using HTML and Python. Now we're going to talk about how you can actually send that website to other people, because right now your website is just living on your local web server. You can only access it on your own computer when you type in something like localhost 5000. What we want to do is be able to type in something like www.mywebsite.com and get to your website. So that's what this tutorial is going to be about. Stay tuned, and we're going to go quick. Okay, so to begin, we're going to be using a tool called Heroku. If you don't know what Heroku is, it's basically a web framework for you to upload your Flask app and store it on Heroku servers. Basically, Heroku takes all of the code that you've written for your Flask app, stores it on the cloud, and then when people navigate to your Heroku website, they can visit your website. Now, there's a few simple things that you need to do before you can set up and deploy to Heroku, and we're going to cover all of that from step 1 through the very end. The very first thing you need to do is install the Heroku CLI, which is basically the command line interface. It allows you to be able to do things like push your app to Heroku directly from your Mac's terminal or your Windows command prompt. So to do that, you need to follow the instructions based on your specific OS and device. And so I've linked this page in the description. Once you've actually installed Heroku, you need to create an account and sign up for Heroku. You can see I'm already signed up right here, but you will need to make your own account. Once you do that, type in Heroku login in your command prompt. Then it will give you an option to enter your username and your password, and that will link your Heroku login that you just created and signed up with and your computer. And then we can get started in actually pushing our app to Heroku. But before we do that, we need to do something called installing Gunicorn. So right now, your app is running on your local web server, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the web server that is used on Heroku is called Gunicorn, and to use that, you need to do something called installing Gunicorn. So to do so, simply type in pip, which is Python's default package installer, and then install, and then Gunicorn. It should take a bit to load. I'm not going to do it because I already have it installed. Once it is loaded, we can get started in actually creating the essential files. So in order for Heroku to recognize your app as a proper Flask app, we need to do a couple of housekeeping tasks. For example, we need to create a file called Requirements.txt that allows you to tell Heroku what modules you'll be using. So for example, in my app, I'm using Flask. So I need to tell Heroku, look, we're going to need Flask for our app. Similarly, if I'm using something like gspread, which I did a tutorial on earlier, you can click up here to see that tutorial. But if I was using gspread, I would need to tell Heroku, look, you need to install gspread in my Heroku app. So in order to create requirements.txt, first navigate to the directory of your project. So my project is called Reference Heroku Project. It's the same as the Reference Flask project we made earlier. We're just going to change things to deploy it to Heroku. Now that I've cd'd into the directory, I'm going to run pip freeze requirements.txt. This little caret arrow symbolizes that I'm taking all of the things I've installed using pip before, all the packages that I need, and putting it into requirements.txt. And you'll notice requirements.txt will end up appearing inside of my reference Heroku project. There it is, requirements.txt. If you click on it, it's this long list of a ton of different requirements. In fact, chances are you don't need half of these, but it's okay to just pip freeze all of them that you need. If later in the future you get some errors because of some of these requirements, you can just remove the ones you don't need. Okay, now that we got our requirements.txt, we're going to want to create what's called a ProcFile. Okay, so a ProcFile is the smallest, most simple file that you're probably ever going to write. It's just a file that describes what your app is. And so in this case, it's a web Gunicorn app. Remember, Gunicorn is the web server we're using on Heroku. And we want to specify to Heroku, look, this is just a web app that we want to run on Gunicorn. So in order to do that, we need to create a new file inside of our main project directory. We need to call it ProcFile, not ProcFile.txt, not ProcFile.html, just ProcFile, okay? Now that I've created a ProcFile, I'm gonna go ahead and do web:"Gunicorn app:"app. Now, it isn't essential for you to type out all of the code that I'm writing. I've just attached it in the link in the description. So click that link to get all of the code for free, and you can just literally copy and paste it. You don't need to type it along with me. But what this is saying is that we have a web app that's running using Gunicorn with our Python file being called app, right? So in this case, our Python file and our module is called app.py, so that's why we have it saying app over here. If your file is named something differently from app, then you can change the name in the proc file as well to tell Heroku, hey, we want to run blank.py on our Gunicorn web server. Okay, now we've done pretty much all of the housekeeping tasks. We've made our proc file, we've made our requirements file, and now all we need to do is actually deploy our app to Heroku. So in order to do that, it's pretty simple. It's the same way you deploy an app to GitHub. It's just instead of doing git push origin master, we're doing git push Heroku master. So let's get started and actually initialize a Git repository. Now, if you don't know anything about Git, I have a written tutorial on my blog, The Millibit, about Git, which is also linked in the description below. So go ahead and click on that and read that through if you don't know what Git is. But if you do know, go ahead and initialize a new Git repository. Again, I'm in the main directory. Then do git add dot, which adds all of these files, including templates, app, requirements, ProcFile, etc. And then do git commit. And let's say it's our first commit. Okay, so we've now committed all of these insertions into our new repository. But we can't just push to our Heroku app yet because we haven't even created a Heroku app. Remember earlier, we connected our command line interface with our Heroku app. So what we can do, since we've already done that, is run a command called Heroku create, which makes a new Heroku app for you on your Heroku client. So for example, if I do Heroku create the Millibit tutorial app, okay? Now watch what happens. Heroku just created the app and it's running on a website called the millibit-tutorial-app.heroku.com, meaning if I visit this website, I will reach my app. Now it says welcome to your app because we haven't actually pushed any of our files to our app yet. So obviously it's not going to display our website because we still have to push. Remember, this is our website that we made in the last tutorial. We have to push our website to this app. So how do we do that? Well, remember that git init that we did earlier. All we need to do is git push Heroku master. Click enter. And now we're going to be pushing all of our code onto Heroku so that it will be there for you to visit when you visit the millibit-tutorial-app.herokuapp.com. So let's see what's happening in the command line. It says pip app detected, installing Python, installing pip, installing blah, 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 blah. All these things that it's installing are the stuff that we referenced in our requirements.txt file that we created earlier. It's basically installing those modules and dependencies that you need so that your Heroku app will be able to use them when you need to. Then after installing everything, it should say, successfully installed. And then ProcFile declares a web app, meaning Heroku's recognizing we're creating a web app. And at the very end, you should get the app has been deployed to Heroku, which is great. So now all you need to do is click refresh and your app should come up. There you go. Here is my app running on Heroku, the one that we made in our last tutorial on the millibit-tutorial-app.heroku.com. And here's that same exact app running in the local host. So this is how you can simply, it's only been about 10 minutes, simply deploy your app to Heroku all you need to do is follow these steps. Now the steps are outlined very detailed below in the link in the description, and you just click on that and you get all the code. You get detailed paragraphs explaining what each line is doing. I know I went kind of fast, but this was a no BS tutorial on how to deploy your app. So if you enjoyed that, go ahead and leave a thumbs up, comment any questions you have. I'll respond to all comments. Thank you so much for listening.